All
I
right.
I've lost.
Yeah, I think we're good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see. I've lost you for some reason.
Oh,
But I can hear you.
well,
Okay, I got you back.
okay.
I
I'm
don't
going
know
to
what.
pull up my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to do just a very, very short review because I want to focus on chapter 15 and 16, which is an introduction to verbs. And start with, let me get my, let's see. Sounded like you're reorganizing.
Oh, I threw something over here, and my notebook got away from me. Gotta get my notebook. Okay, got it. Okay.
Just a quick review. So it looks like I don't know if you can hear me. There's a storm going through our area, and I'm getting a note that says my internet is unstable.
Yeah, we're having the same problem over here.
So if we lose each other, I'll just record this at a later time, and then we'll go from there. But just as a quick review, our articles follow our noun declensions for the most part. The nominative, singular, ha, he, ta, masculine, masculine, feminine, and neuter. The genitive has the omicron stem ending with the upsilon ending, case ending. And the feminine for the article is the eta sigma ending, and under the noun it could be alpha sigma or eta sigma. One of the noun rules has that the same masculine genitive is going to be the same for the neuter genitive, as well as in the dative singular genitive will be the same as the neuter singular, and sure enough they are. To, taste, to, toe, te, toe, that's the omega with the iota subscript, beta with the iota subscript, and omega with the iota subscript. Accusative singular follows a similar path, ton, tain, ta. And so one of our noun rules is that the nominative and the accusative neuter singular will be the same, and they are. And we get our plural, hoi, hi, ta for the nominative plural. The genitive plural with the our famous omega nu ending, tone, 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 across the masculine, feminine, and neuter. Tois, tais, tois, that is our iota standing out there for us with the circumflex to represent the dative plural. And tus, tas, ta. Again, one of the noun rules for the plural, nominative, and accusative plural are the same, and they are. We also see that the genitive plural in the masculine and the neuter are the same, as well as the dative plural, masculine and neuter. So follows everything we've learned. Touch on a couple other things. A quick review of personal pronouns. The first person and second person has no gender. Begins with ego for the first person singular, meaning I. Follows the mu, moi, me paradigm for the genitive singular, dative, and accusative, meaning my, me, and me. With the epsilon in front of the mu, moi, or me, that's an emphatic or emphasis, being like my versus my, and to me, normally in contrast to, oftentimes in contrast to something other than, it's mine, not yours. In the plural, we have the eta, a rough breathing, beginning in the nominative plural, hemes for we, hemon, our omega nu ending, hemin, our iota dative for to us, and hemos for the accusative plural. The second person gender is very similar, except it's with su, and with su, and then su, soy, and se, The emphatic just adds adds the accent mark, either circumflex or the grave marking. The plural is the same as in the first person, except that it's the upsilon with the rough breathing, humes, humon, humin, humas. Our third person follows the typical noun pattern with second, what's called 2-1-2, second declension masculine, first declension feminine, second declension neuter. Altos got their omicron stem and set sigma ending. Alte, alta, for he, she, or it, third person. L2, the genitive upsilon. Altes, the eta sigma for genitive, and L2 for the second declension neuter, for being possessive, his, her, or its. And our dative with singular with the subscript iota for, just like we've seen before, the omega subscript iota, eta subscript iota, and omega subscript iota for auto, aute, auto, to him, with him, her, or it. And then our accusative singular with our auton, autane, auta for him, her, it. Plural, autoi, autai, auta, they. Possessive, it's their. Auton, auton, auton. That's very regular. And then we get our ois endings, ice endings for the dative plural, tois, tais, tois, to them, with them, in them. Or tus, autus, autus, autas, auta for the them being an accusative plural. Is there any confusion, I guess, with regard to the personal pronouns, first, second, and third? George, are you okay with that?
There's no confusion. It's just there's a lot on that page to learn.
Yeah. Well, I emphasize over and over the patterns to help us to recognize them a little easier. But it's still quite a bit, and it just takes time and effort. We have also the demonstrative pronouns. We have the near ones, near being this or these, this being singular, these being plural. And they follow the same kind of noun endings that we've seen so far with the omicron sigma, the eta, and the omicron endings, or the nominative singular. The difference is here is that it's going to have the rough breathing. So haute versus alte, we have alte here as our first declension feminine, third person singular, but that's a smooth breathing right there. And here we have how with the rough breathing, how with the H sound, haute. So it looks the same, except it's different. It has that rough breathing and makes a different word. And so it's functioning as a demonstrative pronoun, which means it's going to be translated this. So it just means this. It's a 2-1-2 pattern, second declension masculine, first declension feminine, second declension neuter, simply because it needs to be able to agree with whatever antecedent it's pointing back to. If that antecedent is male, it's going to be masculine, and female, it's going to be feminine, and neuter, it's going to be neuter. And so it needs to have that flexibility. Same in the genitive. We have our to, tautes, to, meaning of this, and our dative tauto, taute, tauto, to, with, or in this. So the singular is always this. Tauton, tautane, tautot, and the accusative. And autoi, hautoi with the rough breathing, hautai, hauta, meaning the plural of these. Still a near pronoun, this or these in the plural, of tauton, tautois, tautites, tautois, to these, and in the plural accusative, tutus, tautas, and ta for these. So that's the near. We do the same thing with the far, except it's storming here.
Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah, and same thing with the far, except the far demonstrative, meaning it's going to be translated that or those, and it's always going to start with this ek prefix or root. Ekenos, ekene, ekena, meaning that in the nominative singular. Kenu, kenesa, kenu, kenoi, keno, kenon, kenon, kenain, keno. So those are singular, meaning that, of that, to that, with that, in that, or this, that. The plural follow the same patterns. A kenoi, a kenai, a kena, except the translation for all the plurals, those. A kenon, of those, possessive. Kenois, kenais, kenois, to, with, or in those. A kenus, a kenas, a kena, those. So the reason you know the pattern is to see what antecedent it's pointing back to, but it's still going to be translated typically that or those, singular or plural, in the FAR. You want to know what it's pointing back to because you need to know what it's referring to, that man, that door, that whatever, or those people. And so you need to, so we'll know that by knowing what gender and number it's referring to. And then our relative pronouns, they look very much like our articles without the tau. Rough breathing, has, hey, ha, hoi, heis, who. And of course, we're typically translating as who, which, or that. Who can also be whom or whose, but who, which, or that. And the genitive who, heis, hoi, of whom, of which, of whose. The dative hoi, hey, hoi, meaning to, with, or in. And the accusative han, hain, ha, who, which, or that. The plural, just like we've seen before, hoi, hi, ha, still whom, which, or that. It's just that now it's going to be, its antecedent is going to be back to a plural, elsewhere. Our genitive plural is the exact same as it's always been. It's hone, 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 with the rough breathing this time. Of whom, which, or whose. Dative is our dative endings for our nouns. Hois, heis, hois. To whom, to which. With whom, in which. And our accusative plural, same as our accusative plural endings for our nouns. Hus, heis, has, except that we have rough breathing. Hus, has, ha, whom, which, and that. So that's all the different pronouns that we went through. I want to move to verbs unless you have questions on what we've done so far.
No.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about verbs. I mean, English verbs, if you're like me, and you're probably not, but a lot of people, some people are, I didn't do well in English grammar. It wasn't my forte. I wasn't excited about it.
Yeah.
I didn't really care. However, in studying my Greek, I've learned more about English grammar than I ever thought I would ever know. And in verbs describe an action or a state of being. I love Greek. I am studying Greek. Those are actions. Greek is the heavenly language. That's a state of being. So verbs describe a action. John hit the ball. Well, hit is obviously an action. John was hit by the ball. Still an action, except, well, we'll get to voice in a minute. The verb's action can express time, past, present, or future. And that's very important because if something was past, we would give a helping word. I was studying Greek. If it's present, I am studying Greek. If it's future, I will be studying Greek. So in English, we use helping words. In Greek, we don't use the helping words. The verbs in Greek have different structures, forms that will determine its time, help you to recognize the time. Verbs action can be ongoing, continuous, or habitual, such as I am studying Greek. Well, if it's ongoing, then it's something I'm continuing to do. Even if it's in the past, I was studying Greek. Well, that was an ongoing event that was done in the past. Versus I study Greek as a ongoing thing as well in the current. It can be undefined. I studied Greek. Well, that's something that's completed, and there's no clear delineation or no aspect to whether it was what time, whether it was continuous or ongoing or whatever. It's just telling you it was completed, an action done. And also going to be perfected. I have studied Greek. Perfected, we really won't get to for a long time, till chapter 25, I think it is. But perfected basically is saying that it's something I've done, completed, and the results of what I've done are ongoing today. So I have studied Greek implies that I now know something about Greek. So it's something I've completed, which provides ongoing results. We really won't get to perfected. Initially, we're going to focus on the continuous and the undefined. But English functions in the same way, very similar to Greek. Past, time is past to present. If you have a tense, it's time. And time is from the standpoint of the speaker, not the hearer. That's important. When you look at the Greek text, New Testament, and they're speaking about an event that will be in the future, an event that is ongoing in the present, an event that was in the past. That's from the perspective of the speaker, not from yours or my perspective, but from the speaker. Aspect. Aspect is something we struggle with in understanding or using in English. But basically, aspect is sort of giving a picture of not the time itself, but the process in the time. Something it can be a completed aspect. I studied last night. Well, it's something I completed, but it tells me that it was done, but I don't know if I spent 5 minutes or 20 minutes or I spent the entire night. I just says I studied last night. So it's a completed or undefined action, often called. It's past. It's a completed action. It's a simple action. Or it can be continuous. I was studying last night. Well, was tells me that it's past. Studying says the ing, which in English is a gerund, would tell me it's ongoing. It was ongoing. It was something that was continuous, and it was done last night. It's an uncompleted action. We use helping verbs or forms. I was for that. So that's generally how English works. For example, a completed action in the present is I study. Past is I studied. In the future, I will study. Continuous action in the present is I am studying. In the past, I was studying. And I will be studying. Notice that the continuous action has the ing. The completed action is normally the simpler or past form. In Greek, it's very similar, but there's some nuances to it. There are 5 functions of the Greek verb, and these 5 functions are over and over and over and over again for a long time. Tense, voice, mood, person, and number. So these are the 5 functions, okay? We'll talk about those as we go. Person and number. Verbs are very much like nouns. They're either singular or they're plural, okay? So number means singular or plural. It's very simple. Verbs will agree with their subject in that they are, if the subject is singular, the verb will be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb will be plural. Like English, Greek has 3 persons. First, second, and third person. I for the singular, and we for the plural in the first person. Our English is you, whether you're plural or singular or plural in the second person. It doesn't really differentiate, although Greek does. Greek will differentiate because we got to know what noun is agreeing with that. And so we'll have something that tells us whether it's second person, singular, or plural. Or third person, singular or plural, he, she, it, or plural, they. And so in Greek, we just like on the nouns, we change the endings. Greek, we do the same thing. They're not case endings. They're not declensions. These are personal endings. Personal endings because they say the person and the number. Akuo, here's the first person with the omega ending. Akues with the second person. And akue with the third person. So our singular, aku, is the root or the stem that means here. So if I want to say I here, I say akuo. If I want to say you, singular, you, George, here, aku ace. If I want to say he, she, or it hears, it's aku a. So we use these endings, these personal endings, in that manner for first, second, and third person singular. If I want to make it plural, first, second, or third person plural, I have the same root or the same stem, aku, and I'm going to say aku amen for first person plural, which would be we here. Aku ete is the second person plural for you. You being you as a group. Aku usi, and sometimes as a movable nu, which we'll show you later. Aku usi is a third person plural, meaning them. So aku omen, aku ete, aku usi, I hear, or excuse me, we hear, you plural here, or they hear, not they, yeah, they hear. So that's correct, they hear. Third person. So a little bit about the voice. So that's our sort of our person and number. The key thing here is that unlike the endings on nouns that we've done so far, those are case endings that tell us the case, nominative, genitive, dative, or accusative. They tell us the number, singular or plural, and they tell us the gender, masculine or feminine. The endings on the verbs are not case endings. They are personal endings. They do not have a gender, and they tell us what person, first, second, or third, singular or plural, is the number. So that's what they give us. The voice indicates how the subject relates to the action or the state of the verb. Like English, Greek verbs have an active and a passive voice, although they also have a middle voice, which we'll touch on in a moment. Active voice, the subject is doing the action of the verb. Passive voice, the subject is receiving the action of the verb. So I have these little diagrams at the top here. The subject is doing the action of the verb to the object. That's the active voice. The subject is receiving the action of the verb, probably from an object. That's a passive voice. But on the middle, which I think is my next slide, yeah. Unlike English, English does not have a middle. Greek verbs have a middle voice. The subject is doing or experiencing with an emphasis on the subject participation. In other words, they're doing the action for their own benefits, self-interest. So the subject is doing the action, but they're also receiving the results of the action. And so these little diagrams hopefully will help you to sort of remember how the voice functions in Greek. And we'll see that as we go. The middle voice, for example, in Matthew 7:27-5, it's apegzata, he hanged himself. It's something he did to himself, okay? Luke 12:37, perizotsetai, it is he will gird himself. So he girds his loincloth up around, or his outer garment, so that he can move. He girds himself. He does something. It's something he does, and he receives the action or the result or benefit of that. Revelation 3:18. Peribale, that you might clothe yourself. It's something that might be done. This is in a subjunctive mood, but we'll do that another day. Might clothe yourself, done to yourself. It is something the subject does and receives the benefit of. In James 1:21, dexasthe is receive for yourselves the implanted word. So obviously it's something the subject does, they receive, but they do it for themselves, the implanted word, and so they're getting the benefit of that. Talk a little bit about tenses, where voice indicates how the subject relates to the action or the state of the verb, whether they're causing the action, whether or not they're receiving the action, or whether or not they're doing the action and the results or the benefits being directed. George, are you back? where voice indicates how the subject relates to the action or state of the verb. In general, the tense involves two elements, time and aspect. Time, as we mentioned, past, present, or future. Aspect is the kind of action that's ongoing.
I'm back.
Okay. Well, might catch up on some of
yeah, I'll do it this evening.
All right. Well, we're looking at the tense right now. We talked about the voice, where the voice is in English we have a active and passive voice. Active, where the subject is doing the action. That's an active voice. And passive is where the verb represents the subject receiving the action. Johnny was hit by the ball. Well, he's receiving the action. Greek also has a middle voice, where the subject does the action and receives the benefit from that, or the results from that. And so he hanged himself. Well, he did something. He's the subject, and the action is he hanged, and he did it to himself. So he is receiving the result of his own action. Tense, where the voice indicates how the subject relates to the action or state of the verb. In general, the tense involves just two elements. We've already mentioned time, past, present, or future, and aspect. Aspect is the kind of action. Something can be in the past, but it could be a one-time thing in the past, or it can be an ongoing thing in the past. It could be something that we mentioned earlier, perfected, something that's completed, but the results of what's completed is felt in the present. So the kind of action can be progressive or continuous is another word for it. It can be summary or completed or undefined is another word for it, or it can be perfected. We're going to focus predominantly on progressive and summary, or in other words, are continuous or completed or undefined. We're not going to really do perfected until probably get to about chapter 25 or so. Although it's a very important tense in the New Testament. We have someone who takes up his cross, and that's a different one. I'll do that later. In Greek, there are really 6 tenses. We're going to focus first on present, and then a few chapters later get into imperfect, and a few chapters later to the future. A few chapters later is what's called the aorist. The aorist is also, like the imperfect, a past time tense, but aorist is going to be more of a completed action. And the perfect, which we've already touched about, and perfected, something, a tense that has a completed action where the results are felt in the current, the present. And then a pluperfect, where it's a completed action with results, completed action in the past, with the results felt in the past. It doesn't move to the future or to the present. And so, but there's only I can't remember now, I think only 6 pluperfect verbs, maybe more than that. Not many in the New Testament. So we're not going to really spend any time here. Our focus is going to be present, imperfect, future, aorist, and perfect. Pluperfect we'll touch on later, but we're not going to spend much time with it. Ultimately, most of our time is going to be with these first 5. We'll start with the present tense, and then we'll also talk about the aspect here. Aspect can be looked at in 3 different ways, which we've already touched on. Something that's continuous. It's like if you're at a parade and you're at ground level watching the parade go by. Well, you don't get the picture of the entire parade all at one point. You get it as it's moving, continuous movement. It's and it's ongoing. So it's a progressive aspect. It's used in the present and the imperfect tense. Or you can look at something from, whether that be the parade or something else. You can get in a helicopter or a high balloon and go high up and see the whole parade at one time. Well, you don't see the detail that's ongoing, that's passing by. You see the big picture of the parade. Or if you're up in the high balloon, seeing the Olympic volleyball game here, or looking at the one centennial Olympic guardsman here, you don't see the detail. You see the completed picture, the whole picture. You get this external or summary or completed or undefined view, and it's used in the aorist and the future tense. You have this perfective tense, perfect tense, or perfective aspect. Basically, it's kind of like something is completed and you're having to deal with the results. Here's the parade has gone by, and guess what the horses left behind? Here's the parade's gone by, and guess what the people left behind? So perfected just really talk a perfect aspect just talks about something that's completed, but yet the ongoing results are being dealt with. So aspect is really talking about the kind of action that's occurring, whether it be in the past, the present, or the future. We have things can be progressive, ongoing, that will be used in the present and the imperfect tense. Things can be more external or summary or undefined or completed, which will be used in the aorist and the future tense, and the perfective, which will be used in well, it's a perfect tense in itself. Oh, there we go. Perfect and pluperfect tense. There we go. Here, if someone wants to be my disciple, he must deny himself. There's a verb, deny himself. Take up his cross. There's a verb, take up, and follow me. Deny and take up. I don't know why that's no. I didn't do that. Deny and take up both are in the completed, or you get the whole picture. Deny is referring to the aorist tense of the whole. Deny all, or the whole. To take up all. But follow me, to follow, is in the a progressive aspect or the continuous aspect. It's an ongoing thing. And so there's a difference in its application in our lives. So we'll see a lot more of that as we go. So that's a quick summary of tenses. You're going to see them as we move forward. This is just an introduction to them. And then mood. So we have person, number, voice, tense, and now we'll deal with mood. That's the 5. Okay, so the mood basically portrays the verb's action or state with reference to whether or not it's real, actual, not real is not a good word, it's actual or potential. When the speaker is speaking and he says, I am, or I love Greek, that he's speaking in terms of in actuality. Or do you love Greek? It's in terms of actuality. But if he wants to put it in more of a potential, I might love Greek, or you might love Greek, that's a potential mood. And so there's a indicative mood, and really there's 4 moods: indicative, subjunctive, imperative, and optative. Indicative mood is where we're going to spend the overwhelming majority of our time, like through chapter, I forget, 29 or 30, something like that.
31. Yeah, 30. 31 is...
Because all 5 tenses that we're going to look at occur in the indicative mood. And so we're going to go through every single tense in the indicative mood and every single voice in the indicative mood. So the present active voice, indicative mood, present passive voice, indicative mood, and so happens in the indicative, passive, and middle work together. And then we'll do the imperfect, active, indicative mood, imperfect, passive, middle, indicative mood, and on down the line. So you do all 5 tenses in the indicative. Then the subjunctive. The subjunctive is something that might occur. A famous verse that everyone knows, John 3:16, for God so loved me, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes might not perish, but have eternal life. Both the might not perish and the eternal life are subjunctive. They're not a guarantee that because God's son died on the cross that everyone is going to have everyone is going to have eternal life, or everyone is going to perish. So subjunctive is referring to a potential. Imperative is typically a command. We would command someone, or Jesus commands someone to do. And so there's an imperative mood. I forget which tenses are in the subjunctive, present, future, and what else? Imperative, I forget what tenses are in the imperative mood. And then there's optative. Optative is much like the subjunctive, except where subjunctive has a good possibility of this potential occurring. Optative has a lesser possibility of occurring. It might occur, but not very probable. There's not many optatives, so we're really not going to spend any time here. We're going to focus on indicative, subjunctive, and imperatives. And so here's some examples and moods. In In the indicative mood, lu-ace, second person, there's my second person singular ending. Lu means to loose or destroy. Loose is a typical response. And it's portrayed as something that is certain. It is asserted. So you loose. You are loosing or you loose. It's portrayed as something that's certain or asserted because it's in the indicative mood. If it was in the subjunctive mood, it would look a little different. It's the exact same word, but it looks a little different, and we'll see why when we get to that point. And it's referring to something that you might be loosing or you should be loosing. It refers to something that's more probable or even desirable. Optative is even less, it's possible, but even less probable. You may be loosing for lu-ois. And then the imperative, lu-a. It is something intended. In other words, loose explanation point. And so the moods function to give us some definitive or actuality or potentiality to the verb, to the what the speaker is saying, how the speaker is using the verbs. There's a little more to that, but we'll get to that when we get there. For example, we already had aku as our stem word for here. And you add the omega, it means I hear. So embedded in the verb is the subject, I hear. Aku by itself is here, but you'll never see that. It's going to include the first person, second person, third person singular, or first person plural, or third person plural. For akues, you hear. Akue, he, she, or it hears. Akuamen, we hear. Akuete, you hear. Akuusi, they hear. And so it functions really that basic. I'm going to break down how these come together in a moment. But I want to talk a little more about the tenses of a Greek verb. There are 5, as we mentioned. In the indicative mood uses all 5. It's the only mood that uses all 5. Once you learn these 5 tenses in the indicative mood, and some of these tenses will apply to the other moods, but you don't have to relearn the tenses. You've already learned them. You just learn how they're applied either as an actuality or potentiality and how they're applied in that mood. And I've given you this whole chart. Normally when I teach the class, I just start with this very first part right here. But what I would do is give you the whole thing, and we're going to focus on this first part. Hopefully you don't get too overwhelmed by looking at everything, but I want to just let you see the big picture. There are 2 ways to present personal endings. There's called primary tenses and secondary tenses. Very simply, primary tenses, with 1 asterisk, refers to the present, future, and perfect tense. These are the tenses, the endings, the verb endings that are used for the present, future, and perfect tense. It's that simple. The active voice will use these, and the middle and passive voice will use these for the present, future, and perfect. Now, the secondary tenses always refer to something that's in the past. So you have the 2 asterisks here referring to imperfect and aorist. And so we have these tense endings, personal endings, that are used for the secondary tenses. Active voice, first, second, and third person, singular and plural, and middle and passive voice, first, second, and third, singular and plural. And so basically you have this 4 quads, 4 sets of tense endings paradigm to learn. But we're going to focus first here. And we'll talk about how they form, and I've given you some things. I'll show you how they work. Hopefully they help you visualize how they come together. But once you get all this, you have all the verbs. Every single verb will use one or the other of these sets right here, with some exceptions. Okay, so let's see how they're put together. In the present tense, that's present is present. It's occurring now from the speaker's perspective. Active voice, meaning the voice relative to action of the verb is the subject is doing the action of the verb. And indicative mood, meaning a mood of actuality. Well, actuality is a word I can think of. Okay, so each the present tense active indicative verb every verb has a stem, just like we had in nouns. They all had a root and a stem. Well, a stem here, we're going to start with the word loo. And loo in of itself means loose. And we're going to add a connecting vowel. A connecting vowel is only there so that we could pronounce the word easier. Lu-ah-min versus lu-min. So there'll be a connecting vowel. And so we have a tense stem, we have the connecting vowel, and we have the personal endings. Now notice it says primary personal ending. Well, that's from this set. Here's the primary right here. So we're going to use these personal endings for the singular and for the plural active voice in the present tense. So that's what that's portraying. Okay? So the personal endings are primary, and here are the endings that we just saw: the omega, the ace, the a, the amen, the ete, and the usi. It's actually a movable nu, so you could see it as usin, but normally it's usi. And so that tells us the person, number, and voice. First person, singular, active. Second person, singular, active. Third person, singular, active. So first person singular for lu-o. Lu means loose. And so lu-o means I am loosing, or I loose. Lu-ace means you are losing. Singular, and lu-a means he, she, or it is loosing. All the present tense, all in the active voice, all singular, first, second, and third person. And that's how it's formed. So in the plural, we do the same thing. Lu-amen, we are loosing. Lu-ete, you are loosing. And lu-usi, they are loosing. Now just to touch on how these are formed. I'm going to change to a pen, see if I can write. I don't know if I'm going to be able to write or not. I'm going to give it a try. Did that work? Draw. Okay, so this lu-o, or we'll start right here. We have our lu plus the connecting, and then for the first person plural, there is no personal ending. See, that's, I didn't think that. I can find the right thing here. Maybe some text. Oh, annotate. Highlighter, I can draw. Yeah, I got text. No, lets me type. Okay. I might try typing. Looking at this first person singular, we're going to start with the, let me see if I can use the Greek. Okay, there's my stem. What I'm going to do is add the connecting vowel, and then the connecting vowel is the omicron. And then there is no personal ending. Well, what happens is that because there's no personal ending, it's called a zero or something, basically that omicron gets lengthened, and it becomes, there's a stem, it becomes lu-o. So that omicron gets lengthened, and that's how that changes. Oftentimes, just like it was in nouns, in verbs, the vowels will change. They'll combine, or shorten. And so, as here, the first person singular is lu-o. It's using the connecting vowel. One thing to recognize too is that if I remember right, let's see, with we use the omicron.
If there's no,
is an omicron.
But see, you can use either the omicron or the epsilon if there's no personal ending.
No, I can't remember that. I think I think when there's a mu, when the personal ending starts with a mu or a nu, such as down here with the
then it's an omicron.
It's an omicron. If it's not a mu or a nu, it's going to be the epsilon. And so here the ending is the personal ending that starts with a nu and so it's an omicron. There's a pattern. I didn't learn that till much later. What I learned is this pattern: omicron, epsilon, epsilon, omicron, epsilon, omicron. I just learned that little simple pattern. However, there is a rule, and the rule is that when the personal ending starts with a mu or a nu, it's an omicron. I'm not sure about it's probably when there's nothing to. I'll have to look that up.
If you go to 16.5.
Yeah, I looked at that earlier, and I don't think it had the. I don't remember seeing
if the personal ending begins with mu or nu, the connecting vowel is omicron. The connecting vowel begins, or the connecting vowel in every other case.
Okay, if no personal ending is used, the connecting vowel can either be omicron or epsilon. You're right. Okay. All right. That's what I didn't get the rest of that part. So the key thing here is that the if there's no personal ending, it could be either. And I think that I know it's the case because I remember now when you look at some of the other paradigms especially in the imperative or in the perfect in the secondary tenses, there are some that are with an epsilon. But anyway, so it can be when there's no personal ending, it's either going to be omicron or epsilon. When there's a mu or a nu for the personal ending beginning, then it's going to be an omicron. Otherwise, it's an epsilon. And so, but that's how these are formed. I'll see if there's something else I want to point out before. In the second person singular, basically what happens, if I remember right, I think that's written somewhere on the bottom here. I forget which number it is now. But basically what happens is that lu plus the eta, let's see, we don't do plus the epsilon, plus the sigma for the personal ending. The sigma drops off. Basically, I'm trying to remember now. I looked at that earlier, and I was trying to remember what it said now. Yeah, look at, well, it's my page 133. It's note number 7. The footnote on number 7.
Personal ending.
Yeah, the personal ending actually is, that's why. I forgot it. It's actually, the personal ending is actually this, that's it, this C here. And what happens is called intervolcanic. It's where the sigma drops out between two vowels. That's what happens. So between the epsilon and the iota, the sigma drops out. You get this epsilon iota ending. However, for some reason, the sigma gets added back on the end. And that's how we get luace. And some people say, just think of this iota and sigma, I think it's called metathesis, they switch. That's not actually what occurs, but it's okay to think that because basically the sigma drops out because the iota and the epsilon and the iota, the sigma won't stand between two vowels. And ultimately it drops out and then the sigma comes back. Probably just, I don't have to look, I don't want to guess, I forget why. I looked at it years ago, but I don't remember. But anyway, it comes back. Also, Lue is pretty simple. Luamen is pretty straightforward. Luete is pretty straightforward. Now here's another one where we have got Lu plus the omicron connecting vowel plus the personal ending, which in this case is nu C. Well, what happens is, if you remember one of our rules with the nouns, is the nu will drop off with the sigma. So basically, we get the lu plus the omicron plus the sigma iota. However, what happens with this omicron is because that nu dropped out, is that lu, this omicron gets lengthened or it becomes a diphthong,
Compliance.
and that's that. And then you add the SC. And so you get luuc. Now, it has what's called a movable nu, which means sometimes, just like in our English, we use the word a when the preceding word starts with a consonant, a house. And we use the word an with an n when the preceding word, when the next word starts, not preceding the next word, starts with a vowel. Well, it's an apple. It's not a apple, it's an apple. It's same thing here in Greek. So you have a movable nu, luusi or luusi. So that's how they form, and hopefully that gives you a reasonably good picture of that. And I don't know if there's anything else I need to cover on that, so you get a good story there. All right, get my mouse back. There we go. There we go. All right. Okay. I need to erase that, don't I? Okay, the middle passive is not in chapter 16. It comes, I don't think it is. I think it comes later. It comes, yeah, it comes in chapter 18. But I just want to show you so you can see how the personal endings are done. If you remember right, remember we had over here these personal endings for the active voice, first, second, and third singular, first, second, and third plural, active voice, primary endings for present. We have the same present, except now we're going to do for middle and passive voice. Well, we do the same thing. We just have a different set of endings. My, sai, tai, metha, ses, sat, and tai. And so this is how this matrix works, this quad chart. Chapter 16 is just focused on this little quad right here. Chapter 18 gets to this quad right here in the present tenses. So we want to, so I just have this just for reference. We're not trying to learn it tonight, but just for reference, because you see what happens is the same thing. The stem doesn't change. It's still lu. It still means loose. We still add a connecting vowel to it. And that's generally, say always, but generally to help us in pronunciation. Lu-a metha, or lu-o metha, however you want to pronounce that. We're using the primary personal endings. We haven't switched to the secondary. They're the primary endings because we're in the present tense. And once we move to another tense, we'll use a, when we move to the imperfect and the aorist tense, then we'll use the secondary tenses, personal endings. But here, this, and I did it in blue just to differentiate middle passive versus active, which is red. It tells us the same thing, person, number of voice. It tells us the stem plus connecting vowel plus the personal ending. So lu-a my, stem, connecting vowel, personal ending, lu-a my, I am being loosed. Something that is done to me, I am being loose, so it's passive. Second person singular, it's going to be lu s with the sigma alpha iota. There's reasons this same kind of thing. This psi actually reduces to lu a. I won't go over tonight because I don't want to overwhelm. It's really chapter 18. We'll do it in chapter 18. The sigma alpha iota reduces to this eta subscript. There's a real easy reason to see why. We'll look at it later. And it becomes lu a. You, second person singular, are being loosed. It's something, it's middle passive, so it's being done to me. Third person singular, lu e tai, it is being loosed. Lu-a metha, we are being loosed. Lu este, you are being loosed. And lu untai, they are being loosed. So the key, and the only reason I really included that is I just want you to see how this chart works. Once you learn all of this, you know all the primary active tenses. Once you learn all of this, you know all the middle passive active primary tenses, excuse me. And so it's worth learning these endings. No ending, iota, mente, nsi, mai, sai, tai, metha, sta, untai. And then later on, when we do the secondary tenses, you'll learn these. Secondaries are used just for the aorist and the imperfect. But the good news is a large percentage of present, future, and perfect tenses. So you'll see these over and over and over and over again. So we did our present active. I want to show you a couple other things. So this is just an introduction, just to show you it works the same, except we use a different set of endings to indicate a different voice, middle and passive. Still the same present tense, same mood indicative. So it's still the mood of actuality, still present time, but the voice has changed. So my person, number, and voice use a different set in the middle passive, present, indicative mood. Now this chart here, you actually find all these charts, by the way, in Mouse, especially the back. Now this is modified a little bit from Mouse. If you go to page, or to, let me see, they're going to start you start on page, I think it's 16.12, you see the master personal ending chart right here, but they only do one quad at a time, which is how I normally teach it. But for online, I thought, well, let me try this differently. I'm going to give you the whole thing. Hopefully don't overwhelm you, but they're focusing just on that one first quad.
Right.
If you go to, I think it's just above the vocabulary on the master verb chart. This is called the master verb chart. And this is how you use this. It's very useful. This is the present tense. We just went over. There's a present tense stem, which we saw, lu. There is a connecting vowel, either omicron or epsilon, and we're using the primary active endings. So our first person singular paradigm starts with lu-o. And so if we learn the rest of it, lu-ace, lu-a, lu-amen, lu-ete, lu-usi, we would know all that paradigm for the primary active present tense. And its inflected meaning, remember inflected is what it's referring to when it's being used in context, means I loose or I am loosing. And so there's a little bit, Mouse has the same thing you see on just above vocabulary, just under 16.6 or 1616, called the master verb chart. And so this is the same thing. Now some of these other components, this is called the, I forget what the A stands for now, the augment. Augment, and the R is a reduplication. Those aren't used in the present tense. They will be used in the imperfect and the aorist and the perfect, but we won't get to those for a while. The tense formatives are going to be when we change out of the present tense. Imperfect is really an expansion or it modifies the present tense, so it doesn't use the tense formative. It changes different ways, and I'll show you that. Basically, there's a tense formative for the future and the aorist, as well as the aorist and the perfect. And so basically, we add the tense formative to the stem, and we have a connecting vowel we talked about, and there's different endings: the primary active endings or the primary middle passive endings, which we did touch on for the present middle passive. Luamai, I am being loosed. So this is how it's used. It gives you the tense. If there's an augment or a reduplication, it'll tell you what their options are. Well, not really all of them, but it tells you like we'll get the tense stem, whether it's present, future active, aorist active, or perfect active. The tense formative, which the present doesn't have. The connecting vowels is omicron, epsilon all the time. And then what endings you're going to use off that quad chart, either the primary active ones or the primary middle passive ones, or the secondary active ones or the secondary middle passive ones. And then what the inflected meaning generally would be used. I put this here predominantly for the helping words, because it helps us, if you go back and look, and in the passive, I was loose, or in the past, I was loosing. In the middle passive, I was being loosed. The past tense is shown in the verb here, loosed, but the ongoing past tense was being loosed is shown there. If the perfect, I have loosed or I have become. So these help you just to recognize what helping words to use in our English translations. They're not the only helping words, but they are a good start with. So this is a good chart to give you the big picture of all the verbs but we're starting with this one line right here. That makes sense? Did I confuse you too much?
No, he went over it there in the book.
Okay. Well, that's it to tonight's lesson. So we went rather quick. No homework because really it's an introduction. When we start Greek 2, we'll pick up with this again and go more in depth. But there are some vocabulary words at the back of the book. They're pretty short. There's not many. Akuo, which we've already touched on. I hear or learn or obey or understand. So you see there's, now one of the things I do want to point out, you notice on the vocabulary words, and I'm on page 137, the very last page, well, not the very last page because there's lots of Jesus in the back, but the last pages of, it's got this, I hear, learn, obey, understand, 428, asterisk, aku. But that aku is the root or the stem. And they show you note 14. That's where we get our word acoustics, the science of sound. But it is valuable to know the root. I wish I'd learned the roots when I first learned Greek. I'd be so much further along than I am now. I'm going back now trying to learn the roots and some of the morphemes, the stem endings, the suffixes and the prefixes and what they mean, because there's meaning to them. So anyway, I hear, I learn, obey, I understand. Well, notice what's written underneath that. They put in parentheses akuon, then akuso, then akusa, and then akekaa, and then a dash, and then akusthane. Well, the parentheses is the akuo is the present active indicative. That's what you'll find in the lexicon. But you'll also find these other forms. Akuon is the imperfect tense. Now, the lexical forms don't show you that. Mouse books does. Then akuso, that sigma tells me it's future. Akusa is the aorist tense. And then akekaa is the perfect tense. And then I forget, let me look at the back of my book because I wrote it down back here. I forget the order of these tenses they have. If I can find it real quick. Yeah, present is first. Now, mouse includes sometimes, and he'll put in parentheses the imperfect, but the lexicons do not include that. Present, future, aorist, perfect, active, and then perfect, that dash is a perfect middle passive. And because it's a dash, what it means is that the word akuo does not have a perfect middle passive. And then the last one is the aorist passive, akuasthane. So there's the different tenses in the active in the middle. They generally, when you look up in the lexicon, they'll give you those, not the imperfect, but the others. And it will go in that order. It'll start with the present, akuo. It won't have a kuon, which is imperfect. It'll have akuso, future, akusa, aorist, active. Then a kekaa, which is a perfect active. It'll have, if there is one, a perfect middle passive. And then it has the aorist middle passive, akusthane. And so that's how you use that. So it might have been too much. I don't know. If you go back to the back of the book, you'll see it in the back. The back of the book has a lot of useful stuff. Learning how to use it is fun. It's pages starting, I think, on page 370 tells you the tense forms of verbs occurring 50 times or more in the New Testament, and they give you a lot of gut rules and things that we're going to go over time. But starting the next page, 372 and following, at least in my book, it lists all these different verbs. And if you go down the left side, agapao, ago, iro, iteo, on down the line. It also gives you notes with them, and a lot of times the notes will tell you a little bit of how it's formed. Sometimes it tells you interesting stuff about what it means in English or what science is representing. But if you go across the top from agapao, excuse me, agapao, that's a contract verb, and I don't like contract verbs. agapao. And at the top there, agape so, there's future. Agape sa, aorist, tense. Agape ka is the perfect active tense. Agape mai is the perfect middle passive tense. And agape thane is the aorist middle passive tense. So that's how that works. So I don't know why they don't put them in the names of the columns, but they don't. So back to our vocabulary. Akuo, I hear, I learn, I obey, or I understand. 428 times in the New Testament, its root is akuo, aku, excuse me. And the next word, blepo, meaning I see, I look at. And there lists underneath it, eblepon, which is the imperfect tense. Blepso is the future. We'll see why that changes later. Eblepsa is the aorist, and there is no middle passive or perfect or middle passive, so they got dashes for it. And that's how that works. 132 times in the New Testament, and the root is blep with the P-I ending. That is going to explain that. Explain why some of the letters change when it comes up against the sigma and such, but that's later. Echo, I have, I hold 708 times. Its root is sex. That's sigma epsilon xi, or excuse me, key. Luo, we've already done. I loose, I untie, I destroy 42 times. Its root is lu. Namos, ha, is a noun, not a verb. And we see there's our case ending omicron sigma with the genitive form omicron upsilon and its nominative singular masculine article ha. It means law or principle. It's 194 times in the New Testament. Its root is nama or nomo, either way you would pronounce it. Hapu, meaning where, that's an adverb, 82 times. Pistuo, here's a verb with the first person omega ending. I believe, I have faith, I trust, 240 times. Its root is pestu. Pra or prosopon, meaning face. This is a noun. It's in the nominative, or excuse me, nominative neuter. That's why it's in the omicron nu ending. The genitive is the omicron epsilon ending, and the ta is our nominative article, neuter article. Face or appearance, 76 times. Its root is prasopa. Tate is a particle meaning then or thereafter, 160 times. Tuflas, or tufle or tuflon. This is an adjective. I know it's an adjective because I have all three of my case endings. I have the omicron sigma, which is a masculine, first declension masculine. I have the, second declension masculine. First declension feminine, the A, eta, and the omicron nu ending, which is the first declension neuter. Or second declension neuter, excuse me. So tuflas, tufle, tuflon, it is a adjective meaning blind. 50 times in the New Testament, its root is tufla. And that's it for the vocabulary. And really, no homework assigned because we're going to pick this up on Greek 2 and start with chapter 16. And but for the test, we do have that 1 John chapter 2 or no 1
5 1 2 5. 1 John 1 2 5.
Yeah, 1 John 1:5 through 2:5. You're right. Yeah. So that'll be the test. Open book. Problem. Just don't use a English Bible. And I did check. Well, the secretary was out, but I asked the ministers we have at our congregation. They have not seen homework from you yet. But I didn't get a chance to talk to the secretary. So when I talk to her, she may have hit it somewhere and they don't know it. But I'll confirm that with her. But I haven't seen it yet, so we'll follow up on that. If I don't, I'll give you a call or send you a note or an email or something.
It's a big brown envelope.
Yeah, normally it's not hard to find. So yeah, I get them before. So they gave me some other mail I had, but that wasn't it. So it's like okay. So I'll follow up on that when I get a hold of her and probably I'll try to do it tomorrow. But I'm leaving town tomorrow, so I'm trying to get a lot of stuff done. But we'll follow up on it and see where we're at, and make sure we get all the homework done, and want to work on the test and make it work. George, any questions? Any thoughts?
You want to translate 1 John verses 1 through 5.
No, sir. First John for the test. 1 John, chapter 1, verse 5.
Oh, just verse 5.
No, through chapter 2, verse 5.
So
1:5 through 2:5.
1:5 through 5. Okay. And what's the cutoff to get this to you?
How long do you think it should take you? About 2 or 3 weeks?
Oh, not that long. I mean,
Let's give it 2 weeks, and I got to look at find the homework anyway. So, and I'm going to be out 2 weeks anyway. I'm leaving tomorrow for 2 weeks. We're going to see my daughter, and we got some other things we're going to do. So let's give it 2 weeks, and if you have a problem, just send me a note, and we'll work it from there.
okay.
You obviously want to get it done before too much time passes, because then you begin to lose stuff if you don't use it.
Yeah, I don't want to sit around. It's not doing it.
Right.
So we'll do that, get the rest of the homework to you and this.
Okay, that sounds good. And if you got any call or questions, just give me a call or send me a text or an email, and I'll work it.
Okay, appreciate it.
Appreciate you, George. Wish you, and how's Kathy doing? She's doing better?
She's doing better.
Good.
She had a little gallbladder upset yesterday, but it's from eating fried fish.
I'm saying eating the wrong foods.
Yeah, she ate the wrong food. I was at a funeral and I came back through Fort Valley and I said, "You want to pick up Captain D's?" And she said, "Yes." And
so it's your fault.
yeah. Well, no, because she told me what she wanted and I didn't think about it at the time, but she should have had the grilled fish.
All right. Well, we'll say a prayer for her and for y'all, and
we appreciate it.
Send me a note if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a good night. Safe trip.
All right. God bless.